on today's subject, a split second, the awakening call. So thank you for coming and sharing. So what does that really mean? I know many of you just come to have a Kundalini experience, but there is actually a title to today's class, and it's a split second, the awakening call. And I was meditating on that before I came here, and just remembering the times in my life where it was an awakening call, a call to know something, a call to action, a call for change, a call for a moment where a light bulb went on. What's that expression? Like a light bulb just went on. I just had a brainstorm. It was just like one of those moments. They call them now an aha moment. I had an aha moment. And most of you who are sitting here have had aha moments, because otherwise you wouldn't be sitting here. You'd be off doing something else. But so much of the time in scriptures, whether it's Christianity or it's Hindu scriptures, Native American, Jewish, we're almost waiting for like the sky to open and God to ascend down and just write something like Abraham on the tablets, and it's a big, giant event that forever will change your life to that. And it's actually an awakening all along. And if you start looking at your life, you can start looking at the first awakening times. And when I was teaching our closing teachers training in New York, we actually wrote about our first remembrance of the awakening call. And it was amazing, the stories. You know, when I was 4 years old, when I was 3 years old, when I was 6 years old, sometimes it wasn't until 20 or 30. That first remembrance is there's something else going on besides just Cheerios for breakfast. You're all going back in your memories, right? Those moments that really collectively brought you here right now. They're not always in this beatific, giant, da-da-da-da, drums are rolling, sky is opening, the thunder on top of a mountain, the awakening. No, sometimes they come in really harrowing ways, scary ways, ones that just jolt you. But the first thing that we often do is try to diagnose it, try to figure out why it happened, become a victim of it, go to our therapist or psychiatrist to try to figure out the patterning. In other words, the Western mind, instead of just going into that awakening space, will try to figure out why and what significance of it, and on and on. There's an old story that there was a philosopher, and philosophy is not a way of life, it's a discussion of life, but it's not a way of life. And a mystic, which is a way of life. They were walking in the jungle in India. Thunder and lightning came. It was a flash storm with lots of lightning and lots of thunder, and it was dark at night. And they couldn't see where they were going. And it came just all of a sudden, the darkness came before they could reach their village, where the sun was still supposed to leading them, but then darkness came, the flood came, everything came. And the philosopher stopped in a philosophical way, looking up at the heavens and trying to analyze, in a sense, why it was all happening. Meanwhile, it was basically pretty survival. Let's do something instead of discussing the whys. Where the mystic just kept his eyes on the path. The philosopher was looking in the heavens, trying to figure it out. The mystic said, just follow the path. And so if you spend time in a country as mystical as India, where common things can really be miraculous things there, and they're identifiable as miraculous things. You go into a shop thinking you're going to buy some food, and you'll end up meeting somebody who perhaps you've been looking for that source for a long time, just in conversation, or they overhearing you or them, and before you know it, it's that you're at their home for tea, or somebody else, and it just is a mystical. Sometimes you lay at night in bed, and you're lacing the experiences of the day, and each one has fallen into something else mystical and magical. It doesn't happen as much in the West because we're very analytical and we kind of stick to schedules and try to be on time and all of that and try to stay more linear. So when something awakening comes, we attempt to pull it down to linear. Even a car accident, even an illness, even a jolt in your relationship. The first question is, why? Why did this happen to me? Often falling into victim instead of having the experience of taking an aerial view of it on a more mystical or spiritual level. When I was young, meaning around 22, 23 years old, and I was really seeking, all I wanted to do was find my purpose in life. Otherwise, I basically didn't want to live. It had to have a bigger purpose than the way perhaps my parents lived, and I had seen the human being living in the West, in the Midwest, just earning money, getting a job, going to college, not ever valuing if the value of your work was valuable, was it contributing, nothing like that. It was just very like this, save the money, retirement, you're 20 thinking about retirement, it's like, whoa. And so I engaged in some pretty crazy things, just in a rebellious act to write off that which went before, because I knew in some place in my heart, even though we didn't know the word Aquarian age, we didn't know anything except we were labeled with the name hippies. We didn't give that to ourselves. In fact, I don't even know who gave it to us. We were angry about the war in Vietnam. We wanted no more war. We knew that love was the only way, but we had a lot of anger firing behind it. And so as a result, we were pretty rebellious, we were pretty angry, but we were trying to live a life of love. And of course that encompassed psychedelic drugs, community living, almost going against everything your parents had said was right to almost the wrong of it. But the bottom line of it all is we really wanted to love. We wanted desperately to belong to something that had a reason to be, or otherwise, why just repeat the patterning that we had been seeing for hundreds and hundreds of years. And there were 3 incidences that happened to me. And when I look back, I see they were awakenings. But at the time, I didn't see them at all. And they were all, I was near death to all of them. I had 3 different incidences in my life that brought me to a hair away from my last breath. And when I look back on it, it was Creator just knocking on my door, just longing for me to surrender and to know that God is the doer. Oftentimes you get the awakening call, but you don't identify it. Again, as Westerners, we try to label it or identify it with some psychological meaning instead of it's God knocking on your head or your door or your body or your car or whatever it is. And then I began my path in 1970 of what we teach, this incredible technology. And I had a teacher, Yogi Bhajan. And then things started taking shape. Once I align myself with a daily practice, align myself with the purpose to live is to serve, and abstain from drugs and alcohol. But that didn't come out of a rule. It came because they fell away. Again, a mystical call. It was a New Year's Eve. It was 1970. And I got a message. And at that time, I wasn't really used to getting messages like I do now. It was a new message. But it was a message like a voice saying, this will be the last night that you'll entertain alcohol, drugs, and just free in sexuality. And it was. So it wasn't like it was ripped from me. It actually fell away from this calling. And as years went on, there were many, many callings. When I first started this path to lure myself, to be lured into it, I believe, God would wake me up at 2 o'clock every morning, but it would be in the form of Guru Nanak, which was the first teacher of this path. And he would say, wake up, get up, take a cold shower. And it would be 2 in the morning, and we would have gone to bed at 10 or 11. And I would seem so tired, like, how can I do it? But he would always say, get up. And it'd just be in the form of this saint. Now, maybe some of it I can attribute that I was just clearing myself out of drugs in my blood system, and it was taking a while to clear it out, so maybe those were placed in its place as I was clearing with the, you might say, hallucinations or dreams. But it was clear that whatever the message was, get up. And so I did. Instead of 4 like we usually do, I was getting up at 2 and having quite an experience, a private experience in a sense, by myself with the stars, with the sky. It was in Tucson, Arizona, and with God. And then messages came in many forms as the years went on. At first you don't identify them, or maybe some of you do already. But then after a while, they're not ordinary, just, okay, what shall I eat for breakfast, like that. They kind of zoom in when you least expect them. Sometimes people may think that ghosts are giving you messages, but sometimes they're actually, I'm not saying voices, it's a sense. It's just a sense that you get. When we were in our last day of teachers training, or level 2 in New York, of which we just came from, I was having just a lot of, not troubled thoughts, but restful thoughts on Sunday. And we were teaching a long day. No, it was here. It was here in Ottawa. And there was a beautiful soul there, and a close relative had committed suicide. And we were going to do our prayer for them. We have one prayer we chant, a call, which means I'm dying, and it settles that soul to ascend, and it helps those who they've left behind to help with the healing. And I was feeling unrestful as I was teaching, and then we got to that. And after we did the prayer and the ceremony for the soul, I realized it was him that was just being with us during that time and really longing for us to help him to ascend, because when you leave your body in such a way as taking your own life and not letting God give you the last breath, that in your great confusion, almost always you found the mistake you made, but you can't get back. And you're very, very sad about it. And so we were able to help him to leave and know that, because a call, it really addresses undying, unborn, and self-illumined, that you never really die. And what gave me that insight, very big, was I just had an astrology reading by this beautiful Kabbalah astrologer in Arizona, and he took my chart, which is very exact for him, and it was over the phone, and I'm almost 70, so he started talking about the next 14 years and the next 32 years and the next 40 years. I'm thinking, this guy a joker? You know, what does he think I am? I mean, I wanted to say, don't you realize I'll be 120, 30 years old? And then I realized again in a flash, that what we've always said, you're undying, you're unborn, and you're self-illumined. So your chart goes forever. It doesn't stop just because you take your last breath. And in that moment, like a rush of energy came in, that it was that aha moment. It really is true. Our chart is eternal, our soul is eternal, and so are we. So things like that happen, and I'm sure if you've journaled or just flashing back into your lives of those moments, and maybe you didn't realize them at first, or maybe until now you didn't even identify them. They're moments out of ordinary. Then you say, well, can't all moments be out of ordinary? Yes, they can. And they'll string along as we go along. But for most of us Westerners, living in a world that keeps pulling you down to the linear, to the intellect, you have to almost, I don't want to say fight for those moments, but you really have to stay crystal clear to identify those moments. We were in Boulder, Colorado teaching, and it was snowing, it was very windy, and we were up high above in the mountains. And the wind blew a window open as I was meditating in the morning. And it was like the wind carried the message, and it said, get land. And every time I would ask it, it would just keep bugging me to get land. And as the process went, we were blessed with land in New Mexico. Sometimes you can't question it because it has no logic in your mind, in your linear mind. There's no logic. It's the voice that comes in between. It's the space between your inhale and your exhale. That's why meditation is so profound, to let you elevate to the messages that are waiting for you. And that split second is what gives you the next clue. And again, it may come when your partner betrays you, that, I think I'm going to die. It may be from someone passing. It isn't always like God playing trumpets and angels coming down. It comes, but we're so used to conditioning into tragedy and to victimization that we don't hear, we don't see that moment. Even with somebody passing, if we could be in direct communication with that person passing and help them to ascend, it would be amazing. There's stories, as many of us have read, in the Tibetan lineage and the Hindu lineage, and I'm sure other lineages, where they have really and truly no fear of death. Does it make them sad? Yes. Does their heart hurt? Yes. But they see the bigger picture of it. Two incidences that I've heard from my dear Lama friend of Tibetan lineage is that some high Rinpoche left his body, but he left it in full meditation. He left it sitting in full meditation because he just was ready to go. He knew when he was going to go, and he just ascended out the top of his head. And his body stayed perfectly preserved for 30 days. And even medical teams came from America, and even His Holiness the Dalai Lama sent Tibetan doctors to come to see what is this phenomenon. His body didn't disintegrate, it didn't rot, and he just sat. On the 30th day, one drop of white liquid came out of one nostril and one drop of blood came out of another nostril, and then his body started decomposing. So, you say, what's that all about? But yet, there's many ways in many, many different cultures and indigenous peoples that have probably a better grasp on things than most of us in the West. So I implore you to study the ways of others, to learn to meditate more, to get up before the sun comes up, to keep your body as clear as you can, meaning not gross food coming in it, which is meat, fish, alcohol. Now, there's nothing wrong with any of those at all. It's your choice of how clear and how light you want to be. The more light you are, the more you're going to receive, you see. When you're in gross matter and the body is very thick and the mind is very thick, all that I'm saying doesn't really make a lot of sense to you. Some of us have fasted, is that right? Or done cleanses, or done vipassanas, done retreats. They probably were some of the best times in your life. Leaving, going out to the woods for 10 days, going on silence for 7 days, going with just juices for 10 days. All of that is an act of sitting in the middle of the awakening call. We get messages more and more when we're clear. So you can put out a question to the universe. What am I doing with my life? You can also put out a question, is my diet perfect for where I am right now? And either a person will drop in, or a food will drop in, or I need a meditation teacher, please. Meditation person drops in when you least expect it. You see it on a flyer, you go here, you go there. And I'll tell you one thing that I shared with Gurmukh. We were flying up here from New York City, and there was a freebie in the New York Times, and it fell out, and it was on diet, and it was on food. And Michelle Obama was in there. They were trying to teach people that kids eat so much junk that, diabetes, autism, everything. It was good. But there was many, many people advertising in this, but you had to read the little line advertisement. But there was one that was interesting. It was a how to eat better, to live better, to lose weight, or something like that. So I'm just reading it, scanning it. So this was like a message. It said, this was very interesting, that when you eat, if you eat really fast, for whatever reason, you're in a hurry, or you don't think there's enough food, or whatever, it goes back to your childhood, that your stomach cannot connect with your mind to say you've had enough. And if you eat slower, after 20 minutes, your body will say, I'm satisfied. But if you eat really, really fast, your body doesn't have that connection with your mind to say, I'm satisfied. And that to me was like made total sense, because sometimes I eat really fast and I don't chew well, and then I get a stomach ache. So it's like, okay, thank you, God. I asked for a question on guidance, on food, and it came out of something that fell on the airplane floor, and it was in an advertisement form. So you see, all the messages are all over everywhere. And if you put the question out to the universe, and don't look for do, and be totally open to that person, that page, that phone call, or just looking up at the sky. One of my best friends years and years ago, we lived in the forest in Big Sur, and one year we agreed, this friend of mine and myself, to not go in a car, Do not let any money pass through our hands. It must have been an old sadhu remembrance. And to live in the forest with a tent and only own our toothbrush and one change of clothes. So we agreed to do it, and we did it for a year. And it was amazing, because the temptation, not to go in anybody's house, but just stay outdoors. And so how did we earn a living? Well, we found a vacant walnut orchard, and they didn't want to harvest the walnuts. It was just sitting there. So we picked the walnuts and we shelled them, and we made bags, and then we traded at the general store grain. So that we had one little pot, and we ate grain, and we learned how to eat all the different things that grew in the forest. And I don't know where he came from, because he didn't have a name. Now you may say, that's kind of funny, he surely did have a name. He did, but he was not telling anybody his name. He wasn't a convict or anything like that. He just felt that if he could be an example of someone that didn't identify by his name, that he maybe could have set an example. This was in 1965, I think, or 64, somewhere like that. And he never did drugs. And he was a very funny guy, who everybody knew who he was, but they couldn't stand not calling him a name, so they called him No Name. That was his name. But I can remember a flash, an awakening call. He had me stand back. I was much younger on the spiritual path than he was, and he wasn't that much older. But how he got the grace, I don't know, and I probably never will know, because I've never seen him again. He had me walk back into the forest so that he could see me. And I remember he just stood there. And he said, remember two things. That when you are confused, to lay on your back and look at the sky. And just look at the sky, and just keep looking at the sky. And I offer that to you too in your confusion. Because when you look at the sky, it's forever changing. And it's a miracle. And if you look at it long enough, you can see through layers and layers and layers. Second thing, he placed me back there at a distance, and he looked at me and he said, remember the second thing, that you are this also. You are a part of the forest. You're not separate. You're part. You are. And that's all he said. And those were 2 split seconds. And did I get it then? No. It took me years to get it, and I'm still getting it. But you'll remember back, and maybe even after class tonight, an appreciation of your own lives. You just journal or write your awakening, your split-second remembrances, and you'll start lining them up if you remember from the very first, and it's like an absolute miracle. How you're sitting here tonight, when most people, maybe we're 1% of the whole population that would be sitting in this type of setting on a Monday night. And that itself to me is a miracle. The only thing that stops all of us is our busy, busy minds, is our psychological minds that break us down, tear us down, separate us from each other, opinion ourselves. We look in the mirror and we have an opinion. We read a book, we have an opinion. We wait till somebody else says you're good or you're not. It's time, it's so time to link your awakening calls, your split seconds. So every day they happen more and more and more. And what will happen is you get a phone call and it'll seem like, oh, why? And then you'll be able to jump ahead of that and see the good of that phone call. See the whole picture of it. Even if you lose a job, or you get betrayed, or you get a high health diagnosis, all these different things, you jump out of it, you jump over it, and you almost go out and over and face it. and get a new message. Because we travel so much, sometimes we missed flights, sometimes we got delayed, it seemed like this, that, and we used to get disturbed by it because, well, what are the people who are supposed to teach a workshop, and we don't have a visa with a blank page to South Africa, I can't believe this, on and on. And now we just know it has a purpose, each little thing. Everything is so divinely designed. There's no mistakes. There's no mistakes. Unless your mind says they are. So we go back to the same thing over and over again. And it's always the mind. That's why Kundalini Yoga is so centered in healing, correcting, reassembling your mind. So shall we do it tonight? I think everyone's here by now. Okay, very good. I thank you all for coming. Especially for newcomers, one thing that doesn't work, if you try to figure out why you're doing all this funny stuff we're going to do, and when the mind says bring your arms down, it's just the mind that's saying it. It's not your arms. Arms can go forever. And so it's very much fun to see who's running your show. Who's running your life? There's no one out there. It's the little voices in here. And when you ride over those voices with your breath, there's a victory that cannot ever be explained or felt until you have that experience. And then you start linking the victory on the victory on the victory, and that leads you to who you are. So let us sit and rub your hands together, please.